14-year-old second cousin or something, or am I mixing up
so.
Woody Allen?
Is that Roman Polanski?
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm sure lots of people have.
Yeah.
Some weird event where it was like, whoa, I saw Casey naked. Like that's kind of strange.
I want to clarify, when I said we had that opportunity, it was not incest. We were
Floyd, check. Now press the bypass.
Now press the bypass. To inject a little more biology here, because that's what I do.
Honestly, I think it doesn't matter. As long as it's voluntary and everybody's, able to make sound decisions and they make that decision, it shouldn't matter. Like, life is short. Love who you want. Okay, welcome to another kitchen sink microscopy. I am Eric Rosenblatt, and don't forget to like, share, subscribe to this video. We'd really appreciate it because we're just a little fish in a big pond. So all that stuff really counts.
Guess I better get a big gun.
Oh, hey, let me go get one.
Yeah, I'm Casey Rochford, and we would love it if you'd stick around to the end of the episode because we write our own music.
Oh, yeah.
And it's a new song for every episode. And we're coming up on 100 episodes. So we're not even out of music yet. How cool is that? You can find it on Spotify, iTunes, Amazon, blah, blah, blah. And we'd just love it if you would patronize our efforts as musicians and artists.
Yeah, and buy the music, too. And we might be releasing an album on vinyl at some point in the near future.
That would be awesome.
If the stars align. Yeah.
So, what kind of kitchen sink microscopy topic do we have on the docket today?
Well, we're no strangers to controversy. In fact, that's kind of what the origins of this channel are all about, is like basically talking about uncomfortable topics, diving deep and trying to understand them and philosophizing about things in a largely uncontroversial or unconfrontational way, but a largely controversial way. And this particular topic, I think, is probably one of the more controversial ones that we've addressed. And I'm sure you have thoughts on it. I definitely do. I'm sure you do as well, the viewers. I think this has been on the list of topics for a while, but we haven't really gone into it. But I think it's time we talk about incest.
Demonetize.
Yep. It's going to be the yellow dollar sign. Yeah. Oh, man.
Or a gray at this point.
Yeah.
Obviously there are biological ramifications that lean toward the negative side, let's say, for incest. And we can just kind of put that to one side because that's kind of irrefutable, right? So that's like one big red flag.
Inbreeding, right? And stuff, like how the royalty of ancient times, like they got all deformed and weird.
Right, but the philosophy behind, like, is it wrong? Is it gross or disgusting? Or does it make you a bad person to be attracted to someone you're related to? Or is it only wrong if you cross the line and act on it? Or, there's a whole lot to unpack there, I think.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the moral side of things, the legal side of things, of course, is always an aspect. And then there's the scientific side of things. Like, like you had mentioned, the genetic things. Now, I think an important consideration when addressing this topic is the fact that things aren't like they were, say, hundreds of years ago. We have technology. We have the ability to prevent pregnancy for both men and women. You know, there's all, and that's really where all of this stems from. Like, yeah, back 1,000 years ago or something, right? To my understanding, there weren't any kind of prophylactic technologies available.
Like literal sheep intestines, but
yeah. But like readily available, effective kinds of things.
And at some point, they took them out of the sheep before using them. So,
okay, now we're going into the whole animal thing, and we're definitely demonetized. Oh man, jeez.
That's an old joke.
But I think that the genesis of people's apprehension to this particular, I don't know what to call it, a lifestyle or relationship.
Oh, that's going to piss people
kind of thing.
off.
Yeah.
Like, lumping things like pedophilia and incest into a lifestyle or, like a sexual preference really rubs people the wrong way because they think that sexual preference carries like a positive connotation. It has a neutral connotation.
That's true. Yeah.
It's just what it is, and you can make your own judgments on what's good and bad, and that's your personal view, right?
Yeah, well, and my thought is, my own personal philosophy is the initiation of force can never be justified. That's the core tenet of my philosophy. So as long as people are consenting, it's okay. If you're taking advantage of somebody, right? Like maybe you're a brother that's 20 years older than a sister or whatever, or another brother, who knows? Whatever the case, maybe that's a little too far. But if everybody's kind of on the same page, I don't see what the problem is. Especially like going back to what I was kind of outlining is like all of this stems from the past. This kind of how people get all angry or emotional or something when they think about incest or talk about it or see it or whatever. It goes back to that old time where, yeah, you could actually have a baby that would be all deformed and weird and mutated and strange. Today, you can have sex for like your entire life and never have a kid. We have the technology, like multiple different avenues you could take to avoid impregnating a person or getting somebody pregnant. So, with that in mind, what's the problem?
Yeah.
Like, why is it that if a close relative is bad, but second cousins or something, everybody's totally fine with that? Why? Why do you cross that one generational line and all of a sudden everything's totally cool, right? Like thumbs up. It's kind of like the whole age thing. Like, 17 and 364 days. And
right.
Oh my God, you're going to jail. But in some states. But then you have a birthday and suddenly like anything goes. You could do porn. You could be gangbangs, like whatever.
You're not a pervert anymore.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah.
Like
so, biologically, I know I said we could put this to the side, but deformities are usually something that happens if it's like incest runs in the family, like the thoroughbred sort of
multi-generational kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, it's not to say that you can't have problems because you are using a rather homogeneous gene pool. That you're playing around with.
Of course, you could still have problems apart from that. Like
but there's still mitochondrial differences and things like that. That one generation of incest wouldn't necessarily be an end of the world situation for the offspring.
Yeah.
But So second cousins, I always get confused on this and that, like twice removed and all this crap. But
So do I.
is that like where you share great grandparents or something, or?
Honestly, I get, like I said, I get confused as well.
Yeah.
So I'd like illumination from the viewers. Like if they can explain that to us. I don't do the Google if I don't know. I try to figure it out or ask other people.
Yeah, I would think that's what it is, because a first cousin or whatever, that's, you share grandparents, and your parents are siblings, and that sort of thing. So I guess it's second cousin, your parents are cousins, right? And your great grandparents are shared.
Probably, and that puts you far enough away genetically that you're not as similar.
Yeah.
As
because all of their genes came from way different places than all of their genes, and it's trickled down through enough generations that there's enough difference there. So, yeah, I can see the argument. Wasn't that what Jerry Lee Lewis did or something? Didn't he marry his 14-year-old second cousin or something? Or am I mixing up Woody Allen?
Is that Roman Pulaski?
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm sure lots of people have.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. Like I don't know. Honestly, I think it doesn't matter as long as it's voluntary and everybody's, able to make sound decisions and they make that decision. It shouldn't matter. Like, life is short. Love who you want.
So, I feel like a lot of it comes down to dynamics, right? Relationship dynamics. Yeah. So it's kind of like, here's a question for you. Like, you may answer this differently than a lot of people, but would you feel comfortable having like a 4-way with your brother and 2 girls or something?
Maybe. I mean, I haven't. The good thing is, like, I haven't seen that side of my brother, so it might be a little bit strange.
Exactly. That's
but then again, it's like if you and I did, right? Like, I haven't seen that side of you, so I feel the same weirdness. Like, oh, that's weird. We've been friends for like decades,
and we kind of had that opportunity, and it was kind of like, well, I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
It was a little weird.
And yeah, like
I want to clarify, when I said we had that opportunity, it was not incest. We were.
Good point. Yeah, an outside.
We digressed.
Yeah. Somebody from the outside. I mean, I guess it comes down to individual choice. Like, if you feel weird about something, then you shouldn't do it, or maybe be cautious or something. Like, not everything you feel weird about is something bad.
Right. But, I mean, that does change dynamics, right? Mm-hmm. Like, when you've, you can be friends with an ex, but there is a difference when you've shared a certain level of intimacy that you don't share with other friends, right? Like, there's, I mean, we don't like to put people in buckets, but we do anyway, and
that's what humans do.
Yeah, there's buckets for relationships and stuff, and you generally try not to slosh into the other bucket in most cases, but sometimes it happens.
Well, exactly, and it isn't I would say it's not like a light switch where, as soon as something happens, all of a sudden it's completely different. A lot of people do believe that. I don't believe that. I think things are cumulative, like experiences, and such. Like, yeah, you could have a one-off weird situation, but if that particular thing happened, I'd be like, wow, that was weird. But you and I have had a lot of time behind us, and all of that weighs a lot more than some weird event where it was like, whoa, I saw Casey naked. Like, that's kind of strange. But then again, it can bring people together. Maybe that intimacy, that being exposed or something like that, can enhance the non-sexual relationship. Because this is the thing, it's like, as we talked about with the polyamory thing, everybody focuses on sex. Like, and you know, with incest, everybody focuses on sex. They don't think about the human side of things, like the fact that these are people who have grown up together. Maybe they're really good friends, like family or some of your best friends, hopefully. And you know, maybe that experience translates into an even more expansive relationship. And as my personal view about sex is sex is just sex. And it's a way of sort of deepening the intimacy in a relationship. Whatever kind of, like, because I've had sex with friends, people who are just friends, and we just have sex. It's like, and it hasn't changed anything. It hasn't been anything weird. But I think it depends on who you are as a person. Like, is that something you can deal with and come to terms with, I guess, or something? Or do you have some kind of adverse reaction? Like, I don't know. I just, honestly, like, I don't understand the problem that people have with incest today. Because I think sex is an enhancement of a relationship. And the relationship is so much bigger and deeper than just some kind of physical thing. But yet, most people, and politicians included, kind of just only look at sex. Like, again, why again? Well, going back to the polyamory episode, like, why is sex the issue? Why not intimate moments spent sitting watching the stars, or a meteor shower, or watching a movie together, or hanging out playing a board game or something? Like, those kinds of things are very powerful.
Yeah, I mean, there's feasibly, I would almost say that there's probably almost everybody may have been in some scenario where there was like a close-ish relative that they hung out with a lot and started to like notice they felt about them in a certain way that was akin to the way they felt about a crush or something, and then like had to struggle with reconciling that with social mores and stuff. You know, like, it's like, well, that's, I think most people should be able to agree that that's not that bad of a thing. To like recognize someone's attractive, or to be attracted to a personality, characteristic, or whatever.
Well, and actually, that's a good point. Like, people you are familiar with, like your family, you're more likely to be attracted to them because you have all of that intimate understanding of all the upbringing and things like that.
Yes and no.
Well, I mean, it depends on how your family operates.
Yeah, to inject a little more biology here, because that's what I do.
Yeah.
We're actually, studies have shown that we can even do this with our sense of smell, right? Like olfactory detection of genetic differences. We are more attracted to people that are genetically different than we are. We're biologically programmed,
which is a good thing.
Lean that way.
Yeah, that's a good thing, because we need that genetic diversity to survive.
Yeah. But that said, I'm probably a pretty interesting case study in this, because I'm adopted, right? And I've met my biological family when I was like 20 years old, right?
Yeah.
And so when I went through the adoption agency and they reached out to my mother, she wrote a letter and she included some pictures of her with some of my half siblings and stuff. And I was so excited, and I would go show them to my friends, and they were like, "Dude, your mom's hot. Your sister's hot too." And I was like, yeah, I mean, I guess they are attractive, and it's like, I mean, that's why I'm so hot, you know. But it's like I can recognize that and still not be like, hey, I want to bone my mom or anything. You know? Like it's like there's a difference, and I don't think it's bad to say, hey, you know, like my mom looks good or whatever. You know.
No, and you can objectively look at something or another person and analyze them and be like, well, you're attractive, you know, you look good.
You don't have to be like Wayne and Garth about it. You know?
No, but do we have to play Stacy's mom at the end of this episode? But I guess the thing is, like, oh my God, there's so many thoughts going through my head right now. If you, it all changes in public perception as soon as sex is involved. Like, you remember what's that teacher's name? I think with the
Letourneau.
Mary Kay Letourneau. Yeah, and I think they're still together actually, and they have kids.
Yeah, like our buddy Aaron ran into them at a bar, and they were like super happy and really cool, down to earth people. And,
yeah, exactly. Like, so that's, I mean, granted, it's anecdotal. You know, this one case, right. But it's an example of something working out pretty well. And
I mean, that wasn't incest, but, you know, like, I see where you're going
like the
with
age thing, and the
taboo and all that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Because I think people conflate the two. Those things kind of converge philosophically in a lot of people's minds. Like, it's all the same bucket that all those things exist in. You know, older people, younger people, like siblings, mothers and fathers and kids and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But yet everybody focuses on the sex, ignoring entirely the relationship which exists beyond that.
Well, and here's another thing. Having grown up in a Catholic environment with the Bible and everything, the story of Adam and Eve, right? First two people. Mm-hmm. You only got two people.
Yeah.
And they have two sons. So that right there is almost like a brick wall in the story, but
that's a good point.
But the point I'm trying to get at is when you have just a couple of people, they're basically, that's incest right there. Yeah. You know, like, I mean, obviously, there's, you know, plot holes all over the place with this.
Well, you know. Yeah, exactly. The fact that, like, what was it? Cain, like, was ejected from Eden and just went to another city. Yeah. Like, where did that city come from?
Right.
You know? Oh man. But that's a good point. Like, morally speaking, imagine you're a family. Let's say.
Ooh, wait.
Let's mix it.
I just sussed it out. Cain and Abel only had their mom to choose from. Ugh.
Giggity. Oh man. Well, maybe not based on some of the
procreation.
Yeah. But you know, imagine you are. I mean, I would say like sailing in the ocean, but let's say you're spacefaring people, and you're a family. So a mother, a father, a brother and sister, and you crash land on some desolate planet. What are you to do? Just die? You know? I mean,
that's an interesting like twist on the Donner Party philosophy.
Yeah,
right? Different kind of eating each other all together.
Oh man, that just went down like a completely twisted path. And we are definitely demonetized now.
That's a sound.
Yeah. I really, because I used to have completely different views on this particular topic many years ago. You know, we were both raised in a religious family and stuff, and a lot of that stemmed from religion, like my views on such things. But then I thought about it logically. I was like, well, does what I feel come from a logical standpoint, or is it some kind of emotional, societal thing or something? And the more I thought about it, I was like, I honestly, today, in the 20th century at the time, I don't have a problem with it.
Well, you ask yourself, I think this is wrong, but why is it wrong?
Exactly.
And then you put it under the microscope. Yeah.
I see what you did there. You should grab that microscope from up there.
And yeah, like once you start scrutinizing like why you think something is wrong, and let's just put it out on the table that you can have like right is on this end of the table, wrong is on that end of the table, and it just rolls to a stop somewhere in the interim. It can be a little wrong maybe, and
it's conditional too. It's dependent on the particular circumstance. Like I said, the initiation of force, or some kind of coercion or something like that. Taking advantage of somebody's ignorance or their innocence or something. That's wrong. But if say like a 12-year-old brother and a 12-year-old sister, like they fall in love, right?
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with that. Like, logically, there's nothing wrong there. Especially because we have the technology. Well, if they can actually have access to that technology. But that aside, maybe we should up the age to the age you can go in and acquire that.
Be consensual and all
that.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. And it's like, is it still wrong if it's just the tip of the iceberg that you're... Well, I was going somewhere with that, but...
Well, yeah, like... I don't see a problem with that if people... I have cat hair in my mouth. If people take the proper precautions, I mean, if you want kids, go for it. But there's a risk when you're close genetically.
Yeah.
And the thing is, like, we have multiple layers of prophylaxis in that regard. Like, there's no way you would honestly have to try to have a kid in this day and age.
Yeah.
So that said, where is the harm? Who is being harmed there? Is it the individuals who are just emotional people who feel emotions and they care about each other and they have experiences together, be they physical or metaphysical or mental or whatever? Or is it society that's being harmed? Like, is it some kind of social mores, like you said, that's being violated, right? We believe this, therefore nobody can do that. Well, that doesn't make any sense. Justify that. That's what I have to say.
So here's a twist. Speaking of like incestual pregnancy, right? What do you think about, because these tend to be the same people, right? What do you think about the people that think, hey, incest is wrong, but they also say, hey, you can't have an abortion even if your dad knocked you up.
Ooh, yeah, that's a good point.
So it's like, wait a minute here. You can't really have your morality both ways, bro.
Well, and that goes back to probably one of my biggest pet peeves, which is hypocrisy. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Like, you have to have grounded philosophical ideas, and they have to be applied universally every time, otherwise it's invalid. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that is a violation of that protocol, I guess.
Yeah.
That it's a double standard, essentially. Like, yeah, like,
Yeah, so that just like compounds the issue, right? You're like, oh, I've been taught to think that incest is wrong, but abortion is also wrong. So it's like, which one is wronger?
well,
like,
and that does lead into like people, siblings or whatever, having encounters and having that kind of outcome occur, and having to do some shady shit to deal with it or hide themselves or something, and that's a huge problem.
And then there's the autonomy of the child too, because it's like earlier you said, hey, if you want to have a kid, go for it, but it's like there is that risk of being deformed or having some disabilities or a shortened lifespan or something. It's like the kid doesn't get to pick that, Like,
No, that's true.
Like when people try to have kids in their late 40s or something, it's like you're like gambling a little more here,
rolling the dice like Russian roulette, maybe.
It's like while I don't think you should necessarily abort someone because they've got Down syndrome or whatever, because they can have like 40-ish years of good life or whatever.
They can actually have a fairly normal life in this day and age. Like,
it's still
200 years ago, it would be a problem, but now...
Well, 200 years ago, lifespans were pretty short anyway.
Well, that's true.
In that context, it should have been less of a big deal back then, right? But now you got to look at how most, the way we gauge most lifespans is double that or more.
Yeah.
Plus or minus. It's actually dipped lately, but especially now with COVID, it's probably...
yeah.
But, like things like that, I mean, we've talked about it before with abortion and stuff like that. The whole autonomy of somebody who doesn't even exist yet. Like, how many chips do you put in that corner, right? Like,
yeah. Well, and with these kinds of things, people have to understand, like, the human as an animal. We naturally want to survive. There's that survival instinct, like, don't die. And people have done some crazy things to survive, and one of our survival things is procreation. We have a very strong drive for that, and I think it's a natural thing. Like, I would argue to the religious folk out there that it's of God, that God wants us. Be fruitful and multiply, right? Isn't that the decree? So people want to have sex. They want to procreate. That's a normal, natural thing. And, if you... Maybe it's not your lifelong partner, but, maybe you have some experiences with a sibling or something like that as you're growing up, learning, because we want to learn. We want to explore and do things, and I think it's a mutual thing. It should be, and I don't think it's wrong. Well, honestly,
this is actually driving the conversation back towards Thoroughbred, like the whole Thoroughbred philosophy, which has existed in humans, right? Like, you want to preserve a certain trait. Like, let's say all these siblings are really great at sports, and we want to keep that in the family. Like, theoretically, whatever, genetic variations they have that made them more nimble or, dexterous or whatever it is that helps them in sports could theoretically be passed on through offspring at a much higher probability of carrying that on, right?
Yeah.
Than if you were to mix with an outsider.
So you're talking like an incestual thing would produce a better result in that regard.
Yeah. If that's your subjective view of better, it's. I mean, this is what we saw a lot of in medieval times, right?
Oh yeah, and nobody looks back at those times and thinks that royalty was wrong in that regard.
Yeah, and it's like, I mean, the human race prevailed as it is, right? So
we're all still here.
Yeah, I mean, if everybody did that, right, like we would basically like branch off into several species, you know, like to the point where we couldn't even procreate with each other if we wanted to.
Yeah,
probably, assuming we lived that long, right? Because there would be so many
true.
problems that would crop up.
Well, and that's true, but that's looking through the lens of the past. In the present, you can. I mean, there's things in the present. There's all kinds of future tech that's coming out. You could basically have sex all day long without ever having a kid.
Yeah, I was just saying, like, if that's the only, like, if our society evolved to be like, hey, you only have sex with your relatives,
yeah,
like, we would basically either peter out entirely or be a whole bunch of different species. Like,
yeah, well,
imagine racism on that level. Like, you think it's bad now?
Oh, it'd be like, what would you call it? What ism would you name it at that point? Geneticism or something like that?
I mean,
yeah.
That could be a whole episode on its own. Like, what if we evolved as, like, I don't know, like 50 different sentient and dominant species. You know, like humans are like the apex predator, right? Like nobody can touch us as far as, you know, like sentient life on this earth, right?
Yeah.
But imagine if, I mean, the last time we saw this was like 100,000 years ago with Neanderthals, right?
Yeah.
You know, and actually there's a really great book by Robert J. Sawyer, series of books actually, called Neanderthals, and it talks about like a mirrored universe where they became the dominant species and Homo sapiens died out.
Which could have actually happened.
Yeah.
You know, like,
I mean, they had huge brains and stuff, and it painted this reality where they had like metric time, and they had like biometric shit built into their forearms that like recorded everything they did, so there was no crime, you know, and they knew when something was wrong with their body, and like it was like such a cool utopian novel series. Like I really love that one and recommend it quite a bit. And then Hominids and Humans, or Humans and Hominids, it was like a trilogy.
Okay.
Yeah. Super good books. But anyway, I forgot where I was going with that.
I forgot where you were too, but then I don't know. I can't read your mind, so yeah. More beer.
Yeah.
No, it's like a really good point, though.
I mean, who knew all of this would come out of an incest discussion?
Yeah,
you know, like,
yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's interesting to think about, like, if we had different mores like that, where let's say incest was okay, and people were like, you know what, we want to be kind of a thoroughbred family, and, you know, every now and then there's, you know, the kid that we keep chained up in the basement or whatever. But, you know, like...
Well, and that's an interesting idea. You know, we do this with dogs and cattle and other animals. Interbreed
and they have
them.
a host of health problems, mind you.
But they give us the features we want. So
Right.
what if we did that with humans?
Yeah. I mean, and that's playing God. That's genetic modification. That's all these things that
well,
have these...
sex is genetic modification, by the way.
Yeah, like,
just
it's more random, but it's still genetic modification. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, these buzzwords that people put so much weight on. It's like, you know, like, look at what else it falls into that bucket.
Exactly. Well, and this is actually a good point to, it kind of illustrates something I think about, like, hang on. Somebody needs some attention. You know, if you're feeling emotional, particularly emotional about something, that's the time you should step back and analyze why you think that way. Like, why are you getting emotional? And is it justified? Because a lot of people just simply get emotional and they think it's good enough. And there you have the Westboro Baptist Church.
Geez.
Yeah. But, you know, I think critical thinking, yeah. I don't know. I'm sorry, this cat is very, very needy cat.
Yeah, like you said, animals are a good example. Like, we have all these breeds that, you know, like pugs have breathing issues, and, you know, like small dogs in general, like, tend to get arthritis or have heart problems or whatever, or like, you know, they can't moderate their own temperature. Like, homeostasis isn't even a thing in these poor animals, right? Like,
Yeah.
they can't do what a living being should be able to do with, you know, like.
Well, it's interesting that, like, purebred animals tend to have all these issues.
Yeah.
But mutts don't.
Well, yeah.
Like, riddle me that. Like, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and that's getting back to what I was saying. Like, we have it programmed into our genes to seek out different people. You know, like, because it's happened for generation upon generation, to the point where we recognize that incest does have a negative biological ramification attached to it. In many
childbearing
cases.
based on incest.
Yeah.
Not incest as an act.
But that potential always exists. You know, like.
Well, and that's my point. So we've explored that.
Right.
But let's put that aside. Let's pretend that nobody can get pregnant. Nobody can bear children. We have
Like me.
Yeah, exactly. So we have the technology to overcome all that. So at that point, what does it matter? Like, where is the problem from incest if you don't have the ability to create offspring, to intersplice your DNA with somebody else? Where's the problem?
Right. Yeah.
Like, where's the harm?
I mean, I've thought about this all through my life, because being adopted, I try to look at things through the lens of a biological offspring versus an adopted offspring. Like, how would I feel about this in these shoes? And, you know, like, being adopted, I've got cousins that are adopted, and I'm like, you know, technically, genetically speaking, there's zero reason why I couldn't have sex with this particular cousin.
Well, but again, like, we're ignoring the genetic side,
Yeah,
because
but I mean,
nobody can have kids.
But even then, it still feels like, ooh, that's taboo, right? Like,
Yeah, and why? Why?
I don't know how much of that is social mores, and how much of that is, like I was alluding to with the family dynamic.
Yeah.
You know, the relationship dynamic thing. You know,
Yeah,
like,
and that's my point, is, like, why is that a problem? If it makes sense,
Well,
like, it's perfectly logical if your interactions, mind you, I'm speaking sexually here, because I think interactions go above and beyond that, and nobody cares about that. They only care about the sex for
I
some
have something
reason.
to say about that, but
Okay.
go ahead.
Like, why is that a problem? Okay, I just lost my train of thought. My cat, like, jumped up
Lots
there.
of beer.
Yeah.
So even putting aside the sex, right?
Yeah.
Let's say it's just about relationship dynamics. I would argue there's still a reason that there's aversion to getting into, like, a romantic space with family.
Okay.
Romance is volatile, right? There is a lot of potential for failure there.
True.
It's basically like flipping a coin. if you look at statistics, right, for marriage and, everyone's had an ex, right?
Yeah.
Like it's just something that happens, right? Family, though, there's an evolutionary drive for altruism, right? You will die to preserve your genetic pool.
Yeah.
Not just your genes, but your pool that you came out of, right? So
your familial relationships and stuff like
so
that.
So your brothers, your sisters, your cousins, you look at that like that is off limits for anything that could jeopardize our genetic pool.
Well, okay, as
here I am bringing biology.
Yeah, as the only poly person in this room right now, I'll say that's personal. That depends on how you do relationships. Because I have exes who we reconnect years later and stuff like.
Everyone
not everything, it's not like it ends, you gotta burn the bridges. Like, don't burn bridges, by the way. Never do that. But that's what people do. And I think that could be part of the problem. I feel like there's still a lot of Puritanism, and a lot of Floyd's checking you out.
To that point, like a lot of romantic relationships will fail because of differences in personality, and those differences in personality can absolutely exist in family.
Well, and differences in personality, but I think the differences in expectation create a lot of those problems.
Yeah.
Like you can have differences, but expectation yields a lot of harm in that regard.
Right.
You expect things are going to go this way or that way.
Things don't meet your standard.
They don't. Yeah, and or that person isn't who you thought they were, and now all of a sudden you're disappointed, and now you hate them.
Yeah.
Like why? Why is that the case? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, like the perception that you are given doesn't meet up with the interpretation of what you were handed, right? Like
yeah,
it's like, oh, if somebody has their profile picture from like way up here, it means they've got a double chin, like
yeah. Well, that's going into those like dream interpretation books, like oh man, that is a dark path to go down if you're not sure of yourself. I just ooh man,
yeah,
this is actually like a pretty good conversation.
Yeah, it really is. I didn't think we would have that much to talk about in this.
We've been going on like 45 minutes or more at this point.
Yeah, but to get back to incest and like my particular like experience. Well, I don't want to say experience because I haven't had experience, but my viewpoint,
demonetized.
My viewpoint,
double demonetized.
I've had a lot of beer. My viewpoint as an adopted person, it's like, those thoughts have run through my mind throughout my life. It's like, what if that happened? Like, what would be wrong with that? Like, is there some kind of legal problem with that? And if so, like, why is it illegal? Like, is there some kind of biological problem with that I'm not seeing because I can't figure it out? Like, the only thing I can really, not eliminate is that, relationship dynamic of, what you put in the family bucket and what you put in a romantic or sexual bucket or whatnot, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the only real physical speed bump, if you will, that I can come up with against incest.
But then, how many families?
Protected sex incest.
Yeah, exactly. Like, prophylaxis accounted for. But then the thing is, like, a lot of families have problems regardless of that.
Yeah.
The thing is, like, you know, you
it's
just
almost
have to,
a non-issue.
Yeah,
right?
you just have to go to like a Thanksgiving dinner and see the arguments. And stuff
Uncle
like that.
Jim's a Republican and Dad's a Democrat.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
but like I'm banging my cousin Stacy, so you know,
and
nobody pays attention to that nonsense. You know?
no, because they're all arguing politics downstairs while we're upstairs. Oh, never mind. I didn't do that.
We're already demonetized.
Yeah. But that's a good point. That man, ooh, there are so many good points actually.
Yeah, I mean, like theoretically, right? If you're at Christmas or whatever, and you know everyone's playing pinochle and it's fucking boring as shit, and you and your cousin go upstairs, and
or you and your sister.
Oh yeah, like you know, like whatever, you know, as long as you're safe and you don't let it get weird and your family dynamic, you can make it work, you know, like I don't see a problem with that.
Yeah, exactly. Like, again, the problem people have with this, the justification is always the childbearing side of things.
Mm-hmm.
Everything else doesn't hold water.
Yeah, and there's merit in that, but yeah, it's like you know, like we say time and time again on this show, it's not black and white, right?
Yeah,
it doesn't have to be like, oh, you had sex, that means you're definitely gonna get pregnant. You know, like, well, no.
Or you have to get married, or whoa, we're suddenly in a relationship. No, you know, I would implore people to analyze their view of sex, and why they hold so much weight on it. Like, because to me, I'm like, well, it could be really awesome. It could be significant, but it can also be just something you do.
Religion.
Well, okay. I didn't want to say that, but yeah, it's probably religion.
It really is.
And again, it goes back to when a lot of these religions were penned, we didn't have the technology we have today.
Right.
So in light of those technological changes, shouldn't we change the way that we see those things?
Yeah.
I have.
Yeah.
Like, I mean...
Biology digression number 4. If you look at other species of, you know, animals and stuff, incest occurs naturally. You know, it's not just like dogs and cats that you want to breed a certain trait out of. Like, sometimes you just want to have sex. And there's your sister, right?
Yeah, our primate cousins and stuff like that. They do the same thing.
This is completely natural.
Yeah.
If you really, like, get down to the nitty-gritty, like, you know, like Nature Channel shit.
Well, and like I said earlier, God wants us to fuck.
You and me, baby, ain't nothing but mammals, so let's do it like they do on the Discovery Channel.
Oh, man. Good song. Yeah, it's this whole like hyper focused on sex thing. Like everything is okay up until the point where like there's penises and vaginas like interacting, and all of a sudden, oh my god, it's like whoa, everything's wrong.
Oh, is it? How much wronger or not wronger is it?
Is that a word? Okay, go ahead.
If you have incestual sex with the same sex. We didn't even talk about it.
I did mention that earlier on. Yeah,
okay.
Like sister or your brother, I think.
Oh, yeah, like in passing.
But yeah, I don't have a problem with that. Like whatever floats your boat, honestly.
But there's
some
no
people do.
risk. It's 100% zero risk of childbearing in that case, right?
That's a good point.
Like with a condom, you've got like the same risk you have of catching COVID, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, so if people want like a contemporary comparison, right?
Yeah.
Like that's kind of like a condom, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, like same-sex incest.
Ooh.
Show me the problem.
That's a good point. I mean, I'd ask, show me the problem with anything, but like, I can't come up with a logical argument against it, honestly.
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly, going into this conversation, I still kind of carried the whole moray against it, but the more I talk about it, the more I'm like, you know, like, even if it's not for me, I don't really see myself being able to cast judgment against somebody that's like, you know what, I think my sister's hot. And
that's the important thing.
Yeah.
That like, if it doesn't work for you, that's okay.
Yeah.
But when you start looking to other people and their interactions and relationships, you have to get a little more complex with the way that you think. And yeah, I think we're still, I guess, whatever, Western society or something, is still very puritanistic, looking at things through the lens of hundreds of years ago when it was a bad idea to interact sexually with your siblings. Today, you could, like I said, you could have sex all day long for years and like never have any kids.
Yeah.
So,
and our
where's the
population
problem?
is so big that that's a drop in an ocean, right?
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
yeah.
Like, what does it matter? I challenge people actually to come up with a logical argument as to why incest is bad in the 21st century. Like, what's wrong with it? I mean, and contrast that with what's wrong with having a traditional relationship too.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
I don't know.
I mean, like, what I brought up as far as the dynamic, honestly, isn't any different than any other relationship dynamic, right? Like, you take a gamble, it can work or it won't work. You know, so, like, the end result is either you've burned a bridge or you haven't, right? Like,
yeah, and with family, you're less likely to burn bridges. You're more likely to be forgiving and understanding of somebody's particular situation. In fact, you might know their history and that kind of thing, which you wouldn't do if you just met somebody online or something like that.
yeah.
Yeah, man, that might be a pretty good point to end on, I think.
Yeah.
I think we've covered enough of this. Probably not enough, but...
Well, I mean, like, we covered a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Like honestly, like, your question, if any of the viewers have thought of something that we haven't covered here, it would be really awesome to hear that, because that would be a whole other discussion that we could have. Like,
Oh, yeah.
you know, a whole other viewpoint that we could riff off of, because, you know, honestly, like, you know, logically speaking, you know, in today's context, there really isn't anything wrong with it.
No.
Right? Nothing any more wrong than any other relationship. Let's put it that way.
Exactly.
Like,
yeah.
You know,
Like,
you have the
as
same
long-
risks as you have in any other relationship
Yeah.
that you enter into with someone. You know?
As long as it's voluntary, right? Like, you know.
And that's kind of a given. You know.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh, yeah.
We're talking about, like, consensual relationships.
Exactly.
That you know, like, two people are attracted to each other.
Two or more.
You two or more. Same sex, different sex. You know, like, do they have sex? Do they not have sex? Doesn't matter. It shouldn't necessarily be wrong. It's always good to evaluate your social mores from time to time and say, hey, could we be better?
Yeah, and why do I believe the way I do? Ask yourself that question.
Not saying incest is better or worse or anything, but
it's something somebody could do.
Yeah,
it's an option, I guess, and maybe a temporary one. To me, I think it's probably a lot more likely it'll be temporary.
I would venture to say, assuming our video even gets published, we're probably the only show on YouTube that has ever discussed incest like this.
I agree. Oh man,
this has got to be like a YouTube gem, right?
Yeah.
Like nobody's done this. Like,
oh,
prove me wrong, right?
Yeah.
Show me someone who's done this.
I can't wait for that. And I would honestly, I enjoy criticism. If you have criticisms of our logic or thought processes or something like that, present them, and present your own ideas and things like that. But seriously, consider what we're saying. Yeah, I think that's about all the time we have for today.
As you open another beer.
Open another beer. Ooh, yeah.
We can go at least another half hour.
Yeah. Oh, you got more beer too.
I do have more beer.
But I think we've touched on most of the major topics and concepts and things like that. It's probably a good point to end on.
Yeah.
Well,
what song are we gonna pick for this one? Jeez.
God. Oh man, we've already done If Only, so that's not going to happen.
Well, if you have any other thoughts, leave them in the comments. As always, thanks for deep sink diving with us into having sex with your cousin or whatnot.
Or your brother, sister, mom,
that's the only
dad.
time I'll probably ever say that particular sentence in my life. But
oh man,
that's one of those unique sentences, right?
Oh, geez. Yeah. I think that's probably a good point to end on. It's been a little over an hour. I think we've delved deeply into this.
Yeah.
No pun intended. Was there a pun?
Yeah. Enjoy the song on the way out.
Yeah. All right. Have a good night,
That's all,
everybody.
folks.